Obviously, Pred himself has already said that he's a free agent after this, and if everything goes according to his plan and timeline and whatnot, he should be back after Major One. So I think that's the biggest takeaway really for all this is it's I mean, most of the people listening and watching the show should know the type of player Pred is and the caliber player he is. He's an all-star caliber player and potential MVP type player for any event he plays in. He can absolutely just take over any single game. And if he's ready to go after Major One and there's a team that's struggling, like basically every team outside of the team that wins Major One should at least consider making a move to get Pred because it's not like um, you have to give something up to acquire him or trade him or pay a buyout or something if he is a free agent, which we technically don't know if he's a restricted free agent or unrestricted. But based on everything we know about the history of OpTic and the way Hex does business and stuff like that, I don't, even if he was still under contract, I don't think he would necessarily block a move to that extent or anything like that. Like if there's a buyout attached, he would probably ask for some sort of buyout. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I think that's the biggest takeaway from all this is whatever the reasoning is and whatever the quote unquote personal issues are, that no longer matters at this point, really. Like obviously wishing Pred the best and hoping he gets through whatever he's dealing with. But what I mean by that, like the personal issues no longer matter to it shouldn't matter to a CDL fan anymore, right? Like that should just be the end of it. It's we know their personal issues. We know it's not something that's causing him to be banned and kept out of competitive Call of Duty moving forward, or at least for the time being. Um, so yeah, it's personal stuff he's got to deal with, and then after he deals with it, he's going to be back in the COD League, and that's the big question: is where is he going to be playing, and what team could he join? And like I said, basically, if he's ready to go right after Major One, almost every single team should be at least considering or toying with the idea of making an offer to get Pred on their squad outside of the team that wins the uh, event. Obviously, there's some outliers there, like Vegas Falcons. I don't really expect them to break up the All Saudi roster, and
Never know.
Miami probably wouldn't. But um, nonetheless, um, there's there are some teams right now who we'll get into our power rankings, but there's some teams who are playing better than expected, and you could either fall into I don't think fall into the trap is really what I want to say, but like you could kind of I guess get a sense of false security in the sense of like I'm just gonna say like Carolina starting 4-0, they could just be like, oh yeah, we're doing really well.
We
We
don't
don't
need
even have
Pred.
to think about
Yeah.
acquiring someone like Pred when realistically like Pred is an upgrade for that roster no matter how well they're playing, right? So you could enter in that situation, or you could be a team like Atlanta FaZe and be like, yeah, we're struggling right now. If we can get someone like Pred, like might not make sense from a role perspective, might have to change some more stuff up, but realistically it can't get worse, right? So maybe we throw a dart and get someone like Pred, and that would be crazy from, a specific phase perspective there. Um, so yeah, that's definitely my overall takeaway from all this Pred stuff is obviously wishing him the best. Hope he gets through this stuff, and I hope to see him back on the COD servers as soon as possible. And we'll just have to wait and find out what team that will be on because that is going to be the most exciting element of all this.
That's false sense of security that you mentioned. I think that was something that, when I think of that, I think of LAT to end last season, because we even talked about as we were going into the offseason. Obviously, they get second at the Esports World Cup. They were, I think, they're very close to beating Toronto in at champs, and they were very competitive at champs. So they finished the season off on a really good note, but we both said like this roster doesn't seem to be like a championship level roster, like on the same level of OpTic and FaZe and Toronto at that time. And so we were kind of wondering, like, does LAT stick with their roster and just bank on we're just going to keep improving as a team, or do you try to make a move? Obviously, LAT went for the latter. They went for multiple moves. They created a super team with Scrap and Hydra and Envoy coming in to pair with Ghosty. So, maybe that is something that, a team like Carolina, obviously, we don't know what the financials of this kind of move is. Like, how much money would PRED cost for a CDL team? But you used Carolina as an example, and I think they're the perfect example, especially at this point in the season, where maybe you think, well, we got TJ and we got these guys, like we feel like we can win with this roster, but Pred does seem to unlock another level or maybe raise the ceiling of multiple teams. I think every team in the CDL, depending on who he's replacing. So, I definitely agree with you. I think it's so interesting. And I was pretty much flabbergasted that he said he was a free agent. Granted, like you mentioned, we're not 100% on if it's like a truly unrestricted free agent or if he's a restricted free agent, how that works and whatever. But it just seems odd. It doesn't seem to make any sense why he would be an unrestricted free agent, but I feel like this is kind of like an unprecedented thing that's happening. Obviously, we've had players like Illy last season. Obviously, just like he was the best player on Seattle, and then the allegations or whatever the rumors, and then he's not on the team anymore, and he wasn't in the CDL the rest of the season, and he still hasn't returned to the CDL. That kind of stuff, has happened, but the World Championship team from last season, like 2 matches in, having to make a roster change like this and then just outright releasing him would be unprecedented, and something that I don't think we can like accurately predict how or what kind of development will come next in all of this. But yeah, man, FaZe I think is gotta be at the top of the list, like just as a potential landing spot with how these first 2 weeks have gone for them. And, obviously we have to wait and see because he's not going to get on a roster, it seems like, until after Major One. And we're going to have the minor. So we're going to have, a glimpse into what FaZe can be like in a tournament environment. Granted, a single elimination environment. And then we're going to see 3 more online qualifier matches from FaZe and every other team in the CDL. And then we're going to get the major. How that works out for them is, remains to be seen, but they've looked horrible compared to what we expect FaZe to look like. And I think Pred, I don't know who exactly he would replace because I don't think it's as simple as FaZe just saying like, okay, we've stuck with this trio and then we're just going to keep dropping the 4th guy for
Yeah,
another
yeah.
guy. So I don't think it's like a guarantee that Draza would be the odd man out in this situation. But it would be a really interesting move, and I think the OpTic FaZe stuff and like I don't think it's like as big of a rivalry now because they haven't been competing directly for championships the last few seasons. They've kind of like been hot and cold at different times, but I think it would add something, especially to the race for the top 3 or what we expected the top 3 to be coming into this season. But I'm just interested in general about what happens next for Pred.
Yeah, I think you saying there that, FaZe would be the top of your list for, potential landing points right now, and I definitely agree with you on the whole, like, not knowing who it would be for and not just like continuing to cycle out that 4th player like you said. For me actually though, the first team I thought of was Cloud9, and that's because literally it's his old Seattle Surge team. If
Yeah.
he went in for Kremp, it would be him, Mac, and Sib, and then attach in for accuracy, but accuracy would be coaching. So that felt like to me, and obviously that's no shot at Kremp or anything. We've gassed him up a little bit, especially on his performance at the end of last year. But again, this is MVP caliber player potential to get. So I think that with like the connections and everything he has with those players and the coach of the team too, that's the one that would be at the top of my list. As you were talking, I was kind of thinking too, just another one that I don't see happening because of how well they played and how well Joe Deceives and Kleenex have looked right now. But in a just absolutely wild scenario where Toronto went on a limb and got PRED, a PRED and Kleenex sub duo might be one of the most disgusting sub duos of all time, and that has me just thinking about it is kind of crazy. So, I again don't see that happening, especially based on the way Toronto's been playing and everything we've heard about, Joe DeCeves and Kleenex working together and working well so far. So, yeah, I think there's, we kind of mentioned Carolina in phase there too. Just as, again, hypothetical uh, landing spots, even despite Carolina's strong start to the season too. Another team like Gentlemates, especially because they're more towards the bottom, they're technically, again, like we said, Vegas probably wouldn't be in the running for acquiring PRED due to the language barrier and all that stuff. But Gentlemates, we also don't know like what their willingness to spend will be in terms of making roster moves and stuff. We also don't know if there will be any restrictions on that due to just the LAG connection that they have, because if however that merger is working or whatever, if LAG is still, God forbid, LAG is in charge of roster moves and Gentlemates is just in charge of like having the name and
Yeah.
doing the watch
The
parties and
wallet
stuff,
has
then like,
cobwebs growing on it.
yeah. So I don't know how that would work. I also don't think from a roles perspective it would really uh, be necessarily a great fit, because like I don't see Pred replacing Kismet or Lens. It would probably be for Priesta, but then you basically have three subs there, and maybe Pred would use an AR. I don't know, but um that's just at this current point, like 0-4 Gentlemates team. That's just the team with the worst record 2 weeks into the online season that could potentially make a sort of splash move to get Pred. So I think overall we both kind of said it now. There's a lot of speculation, and speculation isn't even the right word, but just anticipation for
Mm-hmm.
where Pred could go, because there's it. I mean, it could even be a domino effect, right? Like let's just say in some Stranger Things esque universe, Pred joins Atlanta FaZe, and it's not for Draza, and it's for one of the Tiny Terrors. Obviously, I don't think there's any universe where Atlanta FaZe drops
Probably
Sin.
not,
I
but
still don't think there's any universe where they drop a BZ, but just for the sake of having a fun argument here, um, Pred signs with Atlanta FaZe because Atlanta FaZe stinks at Major One, and he replaces a BZ. Then that's the first domino to fall, because then a BZ can't just be on the open market for too long. Some team's going to snatch him up. It's going to cause somebody else to uh, make a roster change. Then if it's, let's just say for lack of a better example, too, OpTic stinks at Major One, and a BZ becomes available, and then a BZ replaces Hook on OpTic. Like you get what I'm getting at here. There could be a major domino impact from Pred joining. There is also the realistic possibility Pred just joins one of these teams, and that's the only move that happens. So,
mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff could happen here, and it's a really exciting time, even though there is a lot of the negativity around the rumors and stuff. So we got to wait a little bit, and again, we got to hope Pred deals with whatever he's dealing with and gets back soon, and hope he's doing well.
It adds something else to these next, the first minor and then the next qualifying matches and the major. Like we don't typically have a top level player sitting on the sidelines who we fully expect, if he is to come back after Major One. All these teams think, holy crap, like what does this mean for our roster? And these players are probably thinking, especially if you're Atlanta FaZe, if you're one of those top teams, like I feel like there is an exclusive list for Pred. I don't think he's going to, like you mentioned, go to Vegas. He's going to go to Miami. I don't see it, him going back to the Surge. I don't see him going to Minnesota. And so I think those kind of names get, lopped off the list. And then you start looking at like, well, probably not going to Boston either. I'm not sure exactly of like what their standing is financially and all that.
Yeah.
And, we could say the same about LAG and, like you mentioned about, who is kind of pulling the purse strings and all of that. So there's a more exclusive list than just the 12 CDL teams. But like you mentioned, there's a domino effect, especially when there's a player of the caliber of PRED on the sidelines. And just he's kind of lurking over the CDL at this moment. And we can't rule out the possibility of him just returning to OpTic if OpTic were to just not perform up to standard in those qualifying matches and then at Major 1. Like, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing that he just like comes back into the OpTic fold, replaces Hook, and then they just go back on to try to repeat as world champions. Obviously, it seems more unlikely because they released him, but I don't think you can rule out anything. Another team that we didn't really mention, but I just thought would be like an insane level of roster would be LAT. Obviously, the roles would be, we'd have to figure some things out. But if he were to, in theory, replace Envoy, then you have the most talented roster in Call of Duty history. Like, I don't think that there is a single argument. Maybe if you want to say like Karma, Crimsix, Clayster, and Aches, because then you have 4 multi-time world champions, guys that were each considered the best in the world at one time. So like you could make that argument.
I think you make the argument too for Scum Formal.
Yeah.
Clay or Scum Formal. Crim and Karma.
Yeah. So like they're already in that category at that point. Like they're at least just on paper. We'd have to see the results, obviously, because, if we just went off of what happened in paper, like, FaZe would probably be like 3-time world champions at this point. And, we'd be talking about the Tiny Terrors as like the undisputed best players in COD history. Obviously, things haven't worked out quite that way. But I just thought that was an interesting thought. Obviously, LAT made all of these big moves in the offseason to bolster this roster. They, pretty much went completely against what they had said publicly previously about, like, we're going to be more financially responsible. We're going to try to break even, to, holy crap, let's buy out Hydra. Let's get Scrappy in here. Let's get Envoy. Let's make this super team to be competitive at the top of the Call of Duty League. And they've done, I would say more questionable things before, with bringing in Hook, obviously, a few years ago. And, just thinking like he's got to be like the solution to some of our problems. And then obviously didn't work out the way that they wanted. And, they made a change at that point. But LAT has proven to be aggressive in some of the moves that they have done in the CDL since they've joined the Call of Duty League. And I wouldn't be stunned if something like that happened. Obviously, if they're the favorite right now to win Major 1. I think both of us would think that they're the best team currently in the CDL. A lot can change between now and the end of January when Major 1 is. So, we're going to have to keep that in mind as we go along. But, just kind of wrap it up. Like, PRED, if he is to come back after Major 1, but even if he isn't, and we just kind of think that he is, he kind of is like a cloud over the CDL at this moment. Not a dark cloud, but just like, oh, that's kind of weird. It's a funny shape. Maybe we should keep an eye on that one. But he's one of the best players, and obviously he didn't have like the best start to the CDL season, but there was only like 2 matches, so I don't even know how much you can put into that kind of start or anything, because people were saying how bad he was like toward the end of last season, and then he was very good at champs, and he was a big key to why they ended up winning champs. But I'm just interested to see how all of this plays out. Obviously, if we hear any more about this very bizarre situation, and maybe we'll hear more rumors, I'm sure if he is coming back after Major 1, we'll start to hear a little more scuttlebutt, I guess, about where he might be going or who he's interested in, so on and so forth.